Good day and welcome to today's Novamind Webcast as part of the Planet MicroCap Showcase. It is now my pleasure to turn the floor over to your host, CEO Yaron Kasor of Novamind.
Good morning, everybody. Good to be with you. I'll be talking about introducing to some of you and talking in some detail about Novamind in the context of the psychedelic sector. So we'll get started right away. Hope you can all see the presentation on the screen. A quick disclaimer for everybody to note. So let's get started. We're on slide 3. In short, Novamind is a platform company in the psychedelic medicine space that operates both a network of clinics, psychiatry clinics, and operates a clinical research organization. We've been operating these clinics at scale since 2016. We had 20,000 client visits last year, and you can look at our earnings release ended December 31st. We've been providing a range of alternative modalities, including psychedelic medicine. So that's a focus on ketamine-assisted psychotherapy and Spravato as well, which is a prescription form of ketamine. And another example would be TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation. We are positioned to be able to administer and facilitate the MDMA experience and psilocybin experience upon approval of the FDA trials that are undergoing now. And this footprint, both the clinic and the research footprint that I described, we're growing it aggressively now. The growth strategy is based on an organic and M&A model, and I'll talk a bit more about that in the next slides. On to the next slide. This slide gives you an overview of our organization distilled into 3 pillars. The first is clinical care that I mentioned. This is our network of psychiatry clinics. There's 4 in operation, and the brand is SEDAR Psychiatry. The next is Therapeutic Retreats, which we facilitate through strategic investments that we've made in particular jurisdictions where people are operating in the context of regulations where psychedelics or those particular compounds they're using are legal in those jurisdictions. The third pillar of our business is clinical research. As I mentioned, this is a platform that's called a CRO, a contract research organization. So we serve drug developers and we provide phase trial clinical development services that they need to get through the FDA process. This map represents some of the things that I've talked about. You'll see the strategic investments in the therapeutic retreat operators noted in the Netherlands and Costa Rica. The 4 clinics I mentioned are denoted. Those are based in Utah now, and so is our clinical research site. And I'm based in Toronto, where the corporate headquarters is, and most of our board and much of our corporate team is. So the map is significant because it really lays out what is an existing network today on a global basis where we can either provide people with legal psychedelic medicine in the U.S. or refer them outside of the U.S. and really a network that provides the same quality and standard of care that we do at our clinic stateside and can guarantee that quality of care for patients and clients. Here's a look at how we're operating in our psychiatry clinics today. So on the left-hand side, you'll see both ketamine and Spravato noted. Again, for those who may be newer to the sector, to be clear, ketamine is legal across the U.S. and North America, and in fact, most of the world. It's a very well understood dissociative compound, and when applied with certain protocols and paired with therapy, can provide people with very successful outcomes for difficult to treat mental health conditions. Spravato is a prescription form of ketamine. It's a significant drug because it's the first fast-acting drug for depression. Our CMO, Dr. Reed Robison, who I'll talk more about, was involved in the clinical trials for Spravato before they were approved, and that's why we're one of the leading clinic networks offering that capability and that expertise of Spravato. On the right, as you see titled positions for what's next, this is what, when people speak about the MDMA phase 3 trial focused on PTSD, or the psilocybin trials, 2 of them right now in phase 2, focused on similar indications. The expectation is that when those drugs are approved, they will not be self-administered drugs, and the prescriptions will require people to go to a regulated facility that has the expertise to carry out those experiences and those treatments. So this is what we've built our model for at scale. Again, we're running the 4 clinics now, providing all the services you see on the left-hand side of the page, and really building the model for scale in terms of our new expansion to facilitate those drugs that we expect to come online in the near term, 2023 and 2025. Digging a little deeper into SEDAR Psychiatry, as I mentioned, our brand of psychiatry clinics, it was founded in 2016. And, in short, to give people an idea of what our psychiatry clinics, or how they're differentiated, objectively speaking, is that in a typical outpatient mental health clinic or psychiatry clinic, you'll have access to likely cognitive behavioral therapy and medication management or prescription management from a psychiatrist, but not necessarily the alternative mental health modalities, things like ketamine-assisted psychotherapy and Spravato and TMS, as I mentioned. So we specialize in those alternative mental health modalities. Of course, we as well, we offer the traditional CBT and medication management services as well. But these clinics are very much focused on providing people alternatives in many cases when the standard of care has not worked for them. So this is the model that was built by Reed Robison and his partner in the business, Seneca Anderson, and they really brought to the world a model that is working very, very well, and that we are positioning and establishing for scale across the U.S. first, and then with global ambitions. A bit more about the alternative health modalities. In short, what we've seen is significant demand. Again, we're in a position in the sector where we haven't built this business it's waiting for the advent of psychedelic medicine in the form of new drugs that are legalized. We've built this business to operate at scale now, because ketamine as a psychedelic medicine is well understood, has proven to be very effective, and the demand for alternative health services is only growing, as many people I'm sure can appreciate and empathize with. The COVID environment has really exacerbated the need for our services, and so we've seen this business grow 100% year over year, and we're expecting that trend to continue. A bit about our therapeutic retreats that I mentioned earlier. Again, to point out that these retreats are, in fact, strategic investments of Novamind. Novamind does not own these retreats, and we invested in these third parties and in these jurisdictions specifically because they were able to provide people with these alternative experiences not available in the U.S. and not legal in the U.S., and at the same quality and standard of care that we do stateside at our clinics. So these operations are just getting started. We expect a retreat via Circadia later this year, now that COVID is lessening, or the impact is lessening, particularly in the U.S. And in the Netherlands, again, we have the ability to refer people now in real time, if deemed appropriate by our therapists and our psychiatrists, for that psilocybin experience in a safe and legal jurisdiction. I'm going to get into SEDAR Clinical Research, which is our contract research organization. And I mentioned this is a business that is built to serve drug developers. And I'll speak a bit more about the details of how we serve them. But on this first page on the right, you'll see some of our clients. And as you can see, it represents a broad spectrum of big pharma and smaller organizations. We're also, of course, our CMO, Reed Robison, is a coordinating investigator on the MAPS Phase 3 MDMA clinical trial. and contributes there. So we really are involved in a spectrum of research, from preclinical work to phase 2 and phase 3 work. We recently announced that we were a key research site selected by Merck, and that's for a phase 2 trial focused on a treatment-resistant depression drug. And we've also made some unique and some creative investments that I encourage people to look up. Bionomics would be an example of that. We're excited because they have a PTSD therapy that shows promise, and we will also be acting as we'll be evaluated as a clinical trial site for them. So it gives you an idea of the drug developers we're serving. And again, this business was built on the background of Dr. Reid Robison, our CMO, who is really unique both as a clinician and a clinical researcher. On this next slide, you see the research capabilities of SEDAR Clinical Research. And it starts with clinical trial design, patient recruitment, screening and enrollment, and patient management and data collection. So this is just really a visual guide to give people who may not be familiar with the CRO business model what the drug developers and in some cases researchers and academic institutions rely on us for and where our expertise lies. So when you're dealing in, particularly in the psychedelic space, clinical trials are unique. The experience of facilitating those trials because the drugs themselves and the impact in terms of duration and effects need very specialized care, and there's certain infrastructure that goes with that as well. So we have that expertise, particularly in the neuropsychiatric space, and clinical trials for new mental health therapies are a core expertise of ours, and really it's about building the leading CRO in psychedelic medicine and doing work with as many people as we can, because we take a agnostic view insofar as the compounds and the sponsors of those drugs, and we really want to bring as many novel mental health therapies to market as we can, and we have a significant role that we can play in supporting with our research expertise. So that's a bit more about SEDAR Clinical Research. I encourage people to look at our website as well, the SEDAR Clinical Research website and the SEDAR Psychiatry website. You'll find a lot more information there. Getting into a little bit more detail about SEDAR Clinical Research, I'd mentioned that we serve drug developers and that the contract research organization is a fairly well-known business model in terms of the services it provides to those drug developers. The other part of SEDAR Clinical Research is that we, in fact, are developing psychedelic therapy protocols at Novamind. And to explain what it is to develop a psychedelic therapy protocol, it's not the same as drug development. We're not drug developers. But what we do is we look at compounds like MDMA and psilocybin that have a well-understood both harm profile and efficacy profile, and we focus on particular indications, and we design protocols that are paired with those compounds and match with those particular indications for a reason. So an example of some of these protocols you'll see below that we've started working on, FCAP, which is an acronym for Emotion-Focused Ketamine-Assisted Psychotherapy, which we developed in collaboration, again, Reid Robison at Novamind and another leader in the space, Dr. Adele France. And group ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, you'll also know we actually put out a news release just yesterday collaborating on the GCAP protocols focused on anorexia. So you'll see more of these protocols come to life. We're focused on things like palliative, things like indications, underserved indications, and very difficult to treat mental health indications. So things like palliative and things like eating disorders and PTSD, and there's a reason that psychedelic medicine is addressing these underserved markets. The people in these cases that are suffering from these underserved indications because the standard of care is either non-existent or doesn't work. So our focus on protocol development has less to do with building any IP strategy per se. Again, we're not drug developers, but we expect these protocols to be available at our clinics, and as well our vision is to see our work disseminated as far and wide to help as many people as we can. So we expect that in certain verticals and things like addiction or even eating disorders, that some of the infrastructure providers now will adopt our protocols to be able to provide their own patients with another level of care. So it's something we're very excited about, developing these protocols and people being able to access them at our clinics. And that's a big part of both Novamind's clinical and research strategy. This slide is a quick summary. Some of you may not know, but Novamind holds an investment portfolio because we've been very active. We incorporated the company about 2 years ago and began investing at that time. So you'll see holdings there in a great peer group and people that we've collaborated with and wanted to support. Atai will be coming public. It's just reported very soon, so we're excited about that investment, of course. And some of the others that I've noted in the presentation, you can read up on. In short, our investment strategy is to deploy capital in strategic investments. We are not making passive investments, and the point is to invest in and collaborate with people that directly support our strategy and that there's a mutual benefit to moving the industry forward. Here's a look at our executive team. Myself, and I've mentioned Reed Robison, who's our CMO, and has had significant past successes, both launching a venture-backed genomics company in the U.S. and being the founder of a formerly acquired contract research group. To his right on the page is Pierre Boumansour, who joined us a couple months ago. For those of you who aren't familiar with a brand called Life Labs, which is where Pierre was recently. Life Labs is a sort of oligopoly in Canada, and they are about a roughly $1 billion revenue annualized business focused on clinics and diagnostic labs in the healthcare space. So Pierre joined us to bring that capability in terms of tooling our model for scale and positioning us such that we're able to scale with the demand and the expansion plans that we have. I'm not going to go into the details of everyone on the team, but you'll see more additions soon, and we're, of course, very excited about the opportunity at hand and the brain trust that we have. Here's a look at our scientific advisory board, as well as our board of directors. My co-founders in the company, Shirley Weinreb and Jesse Kaplan, who have a great deal of experience building growth companies, and we've been working as partners, collaborating on a lot of companies for many years now. So there's a track record there that some people might be familiar with. Chuck Raffici, of course, one of the biggest players early in cannabis, and who has a lot of experience building new businesses in newly regulated markets, for sure. Again, the scientific advisory board is significant for us. You'll see some particular domain expertise there around eating disorders, around psycho-oncology, and so you can expect to hear more news of our collaboration with those people. Here's a look at the performance of our shares. We listed in January, so January 5th we started trading. We have not raised any capital publicly yet. We raised dollar capital prior to going public, so that last round of financing was in December at $1. Of course, the stock's been a bit of volatility in the last couple of weeks. Seem to be going sideways for everyone, but we're excited and encouraged. Actually, in our case, it's a very tight share structure. We're very much building the business for the long term, and I think people who are investing in the space and evaluating the early entrants need to take a reasonably long-term view, and that if you're investing both from a mission-driven perspective and because you think that it can be very lucrative, those kinds of gains in the order of people expecting significant outsized gains, I think that's reasonable, but I think it takes time. and to build, these businesses. I sometimes refer to them as quasi-public equity, because you're investing in companies that are very early stage of development. And so there needs to be understanding that companies such as ours, although we've made great progress and we run at a significant revenue run rate already, the potential is there, of course, to operate at scale, and our model is intended to grow by, I mentioned, both organically. You'll see us opening up new clinics and new research sites, as well as by acquisition. I won't spend a lot of time on this page, but this is a comparables list of some of the companies in the sector, particularly clinic companies or companies that are focused in part on clinics, and some others that are focused on drug development. So obviously we think there's a pretty big value gap there, and again, we're focused on execution. So when people start looking again at our revenue run rate and our ability to serve 20,000 client visits last year, I think we've only been public a couple months, and I think people will get a better understanding of how we're a leading operator today. Again, not waiting for the advent of newly approved drugs to build a sustainable business. This is a summary slide of many of the things we've talked about. I want to highlight again that we are operating at scale today and can provide a lot of help to people that are seeking alternatives in terms of mental health modalities that can help them. Also point everyone to note our revenue run rate and our business, in fact, growing 100% year over year. And the fact that we're positioned, 2023, 2025, it's not a long time away. We expect that, access to these new treatments at scale will take time, and that's what we're totally focused on. That brings me to the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.